The final email from my ex-wife arrived with the subject line, "I've made a terrible mistake." I deleted it, poured a glass of expensive scotch, and toasted the shattered pieces of the man I used to be. The clink of the heavy crystal tumbler against the mahogany desk was a solitary, definitive sound. It was the period at the end of a sentence, 20 years in the making. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of my corner office, the city of London was a glittering tapestry of ambition and success, a view I'd purchased with a currency of sweat, failure, and a heartbreak so profound it had almost killed me. The email glowed on my screen for a moment longer before I consigned it to the digital void. Olivia's words meant nothing to me now, but once, they had been my entire world. 2 decades earlier, I was a different man. Ethan Reed, a junior architect with ink-stained fingers, a head full of dreams, and a wallet perpetually on a diet. And Olivia. Olivia was the sun around which my universe revolved. She was breathtakingly beautiful, with hair the color of autumn leaves and eyes that promised a life of exquisite happiness. When she laughed, which was often in those early days, it was like music. I would have scaled mountains, swum oceans, and fought dragons for that laugh. We lived in a small, rented flat that smelled of damp and microwave meals. I was designing fire escapes and bathroom extensions for a firm that saw my creativity as a nuisance. But coming home to Olivia, to her kisses and her dreams of a bigger life, made it all bearable. She was my sanctuary. "One day, Eth," she'd say, tracing patterns on my chest as we lay on our secondhand sofa. "One day, you'll design skyscrapers. We'll have a house with a garden, a fancy car. No more counting pennies for the electricity meter." I'd kiss her forehead, my heart swelling with a fierce, protective love. "I promise, Liv. I'll give you everything." But promises, I learned, are fragile things. Time began to wear on Olivia's optimism. Her friends started marrying men in suits who drove company cars and talked about stock options. Our conversations, once filled with shared dreams, began to curdle at the edges with a new, acrid flavor: dissatisfaction. "Sarah's husband just bought her a diamond necklace from Tiffany's," she mentioned one evening, pushing her pasta around her plate. "Must be nice. I'll get you one someday," I said, my own appetite fading. "Someday," she repeated, the word hanging in the air like a verdict. "It's always someday, Ethan." The turning point was a company party I was finally important enough to be invited to. I was proud, ecstatic. It was a chance to network, to be seen. Olivia was thrilled, spending money we didn't have on a dress that made her look like a movie star. And she was the belle of the ball for a while. Men's heads turned, and women's eyes narrowed with envy. I swelled with pride, my beautiful wife on my arm. Then I introduced her to my boss, Mr. Henderson, and his son, Julian. Julian was everything I was not. He was slick, preening, with the bored confidence of inherited wealth. He was being groomed to take over the firm, a fact he never let anyone forget. His eyes undressed Olivia the moment he saw her. "So, you're the lucky man who gets to come home to this every day," Julian said, his hand lingering too long on Olivia's when he kissed it. "A junior draftsman, isn't it? Charming. Real hands-on work." I felt my smile tighten. "Architect. I'm working on the Greystone project." "Ah, the Greystone. The mailroom expansion. Vital work," Julian said, his tone dripping with condescension. He turned his full attention to Olivia. "A woman of your discernment must find our little firm rather tedious. You should see our headquarters in Zurich. Now, that's a building. My design, of course." I was shut out. For the next hour, I watched as Julian poured champagne into Olivia's glass and poured poison into her ear. He spoke of ski trips to Gstaad, art auctions in Monaco, of a life so glamorous and distant it might as well have been on another planet. And I watched Olivia drink it all in, her eyes shining with a reflected light that had nothing to do with me. The ride home was icy. The silence in our beat-up car was a physical presence. "He was interesting," Olivia finally said, staring out the window at the passing ordinary streets. "He's a pompous ass who's never had an original idea in his life," I snapped, the jealousy and humiliation finally boiling over. "At least he's a pompous ass who can afford to take his wife to Monaco," she fired back. "God, Ethan, didn't you see the way he looked at me? He saw my value. He didn't just see a wife to keep locked away in some dingy flat while her husband dreams about fire escapes." The fight that followed was nuclear. It stripped away the last vestiges of our polite fiction. Her words were scalpels, expertly wielded to inflict maximum damage. I was a failure, a dreamer with no ability to deliver. I was holding her back from the life she was meant to have. I was an anchor, and she wanted to be a sail. The next few months were a slow, agonizing death of a marriage. Olivia became colder, more critical. Every small failure of mine, a missed promotion, a bounced check, was met with a sigh of profound disappointment. She started going out more with friends I'd never met. I'd smell a foreign cologne on her coat sometimes. I was too heartbroken, too proud to confront her. The end came on a rainy Tuesday. I'd come home early, having been laid off. The firm was downsizing, and of course, the junior draftsmen were the first to go. I was going to tell her, to beg for her support, to promise I'd find something else. She was waiting for me, her suitcase already packed by the door. "Ethan, sit down. We need to talk." The words every man dreads. My world began to tilt on its axis. "I'm leaving," she said, her voice calm, rehearsed. "I can't do this anymore. This struggle, this poverty of ambition. I want more. Liv, please. I lost my job today. I need you." A flicker of something, pity, disgust, crossed her face. "That just proves my point, doesn't it? It's over, Ethan. I've spoken to a lawyer. Julian has been very supportive." Julian. The name was a punch to the gut. "You're leaving me for him?" The question was a strangled whisper. "I'm leaving for me," she corrected, her voice hardening. "He can give me the life I deserve. You can't give me anything but promises and apologies." She walked out that door without a backward glance. I sat on our ugly sofa, in our damp flat, surrounded by the ghosts of our dead dreams, and I shattered. The divorce was swift and brutal. She took what little we had, citing irreconcilable differences. The last time I saw her in court, she was wearing a new fur coat and a diamond ring that hadn't been there before. She looked through me as if I were a pane of glass. The years that followed my divorce from Olivia were a dark, brutal odyssey. For a long time, I was adrift in a sea of grief and self-pity. I drank too much, slept too little, and moved through life like a ghost. I was a broken man, just as she had implied I was. But somewhere, in the deepest, most battered part of my soul, a tiny ember of defiance refused to be extinguished. It was fanned into a flame by rage, by a raw, burning need to prove her wrong, to prove myself wrong. I moved to London, a city big enough to swallow my failure whole. I took any job I could get, bartending, washing dishes, hauling bricks on construction sites. The physical exhaustion was a blessing. It stopped me from thinking. At night, by the light of a single bare bulb in a squalid bedsit, I would sketch, not fire escapes, but my dreams. Wild, innovative, sustainable architectural designs that poured out of me like an exorcism. I lived on a knife edge of poverty for 5 years. There were days I went hungry. There were nights I considered giving up, going back to a safe, small life. But the memory of Olivia's dismissive eyes, the sound of Julian's condescending laugh, would push me forward. My big break came from the most unlikely of places. I was working on a construction site for a new eco-friendly office development. The lead architects had designed a stunning glass facade that was, in my humble opinion, a structural and environmental nightmare. It would turn the building into a greenhouse, requiring immense energy to cool. Gathering every ounce of courage I had left, I asked to speak to the project manager. I was laughed at, a lowly laborer daring to question the experts. But the site foreman, a gruff old Scot named Mac, saw something in my earnestness. He let me show him my sketches, a redesigned facade using a revolutionary, passive solar design that would regulate temperature naturally. "Lad, it's either brilliant or it's daft," he grunted. "But I've seen the bills for the AC system they're planning. It's criminal. I'll get you 5 minutes with the big man from the investment group. Don't waste it." The big man was Charles Lockwood, a notoriously tough venture capitalist. I stood in a porta-cabin in my dirty work boots, my hands shaking, and presented my idea. I talked about airflow, about angled louvres, about composite materials that captured solar energy. I talked with a passion I hadn't felt in years. He listened, stone-faced. When I finished, he was silent for a full minute. "That design," he finally said, pointing a stubby finger at my sketch. It's yours? Yes, sir. And you're a bricklayer? Today, sir. He stared at me, and a slow smile spread across his face. Well, Mr. Reed, it seems someone has been wasting your talents. You're hired. You have 1 week to formalize these plans. Don't disappoint me. That was the catalyst. Under Charles's ruthless but fair mentorship, I flourished. We patented the Reed Passive Climate System. The building was a monumental success, winning awards and setting new standards for sustainable design. My name, once synonymous with failure, was now on everyone's lips. I started my own firm, Reed Innovative Architecture. We specialized in beautiful, sustainable, and profoundly human-centric designs. The money followed, in amounts so vast they became abstract. The penthouse, the cars, the art on the walls, they weren't trophies. They were benchmarks, measures of a distance I had traveled from that damp flat and that broken man. I never married again. I had relationships, of course, but I kept a part of myself walled off, protecting the core of me that had been so thoroughly demolished. My work became my wife, my passion, my life, and it was enough. I never thought of Olivia. I had excised her from my history. She was a closed chapter, a ghost, until the emails started. They began tentatively about 6 months ago. A friend request on LinkedIn. Then an email to my office, just checking in, seeing how you are. I ignored them. Then the tone became more nostalgic, reminiscing about the good times we had. I deleted them with a cold fury. And then, today, the final, desperate plea. I've made a terrible mistake. I finished my scotch, the warmth spreading through my chest. The past was a country I had no desire to revisit. My assistant, Eleanor, buzzed through. Mr. Reed, your 3 o'clock is here. A Mrs. Olivia Henderson. She paused. She says it's personal. A cold smile touched my lips. Henderson. So, she'd married him. And now she was here. Curiosity, a petty and base emotion, got the better of me. I wanted to see it. I wanted to see the evidence of her better life. Send her in, Eleanor. The door opened, and time folded in on itself. The woman who walked in was still beautiful, but it was a beauty that had been carefully and expensively maintained. Her hair was perfectly highlighted. Her clothes were the height of quiet luxury. But the years had not been kind in other ways. There was a tightness around her mouth that spoke of disappointment, a hardness in her eyes that had replaced their former light. She looked like a perfectly preserved photograph that had been left in the sun too long. The colors were still there, but they'd faded. Ethan, she breathed, her voice a practiced melody of emotion. You look incredible. Olivia, I said, remaining seated behind my desk. A fortress of mahogany and success between us. To what do I owe the pleasure? She flinched slightly at my tone, but recovered quickly, gliding into the chair opposite me. She crossed her legs, a familiar gesture that once would have sent my heart racing. Now, it left me cold. I saw the feature on you in Forbes, she began, her eyes scanning my office, taking in the obvious signs of wealth. I always knew you had it in you, Ethan. I always believed in you. The audacity of the lie was breathtaking. I said nothing, just watched her, letting the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. She shifted in her seat. How have you been? Busy, I replied curtly. Ethan, please, don't be like that. She leaned forward, her perfume trying to invade my space. It was cloying and unfamiliar. I know I hurt you. I was young. I was foolish. I was swayed by glittering things. I didn't know what real value was. You knew exactly what you were doing, Olivia, I said, my voice flat. You made a choice. You traded up. I hope it was worth it. Tears welled in her eyes. They might have been real. It was a nightmare, Ethan. Julian, he was a charming monster. The money was a gilded cage. He was unfaithful, cruel. We divorced 2 years ago. It was messy. He left me with almost nothing. She wiped a tear away with a perfectly manicured finger. All those years, I was so alone. And all I could think about was you, the man I truly loved, the man I threw away. She let the words hang in the air, a confession designed to elicit sympathy, to rekindle an old flame. I felt nothing, no anger, no pity, no satisfaction, just a vast, empty silence. I'm sorry to hear that, I said. And I was, in a distant way. No one deserved cruelty. But that has nothing to do with me. Her composure cracked. Nothing to do with you, Ethan? We had 20 years together. We had 5 years of marriage, Olivia. You ended it. You severed the tie. What happened to you after that is your story, not mine. Don't you see? She pleaded, her voice rising in desperation. This is fate. You're successful now. You're everything I always knew you could be. We can have a second chance. We can have the life we always talked about. I finally stood up. I walked to the window and looked out at my city, the city I had conquered without her. I thought of the hungry, heartbroken man I had been. I thought of the relentless climb out of that darkness. She hadn't been there for the struggle. She didn't get to claim the victory. The life we talked about, Olivia? I said, turning to face her. No. You talked about a big house and a fancy car. I talked about building a life with you. There's a difference. The man who dreamed those dreams with you died a long time ago. You killed him. She stared at me, her face pale, her carefully constructed narrative crumbling around her. You came here because you saw a successful man, I continued, my voice calm and steady. You saw the glittering things. You're making the same calculation you made 20 years ago. You're not here for me. You're here for what I represent. Security, luxury, a comfortable ending. That's not true, she cried, but the lie was naked in her eyes. It is true, I said softly. And the greatest irony is that the man I am today, the man you want, only exists because you left. Your rejection was the fuel. Your cruelty was the anvil on which I was forged. If you had stayed, I would have remained that small, apologetic man, forever trying and failing to earn your love. I owe my success to your absence. I walked back to my desk and pressed the intercom. Eleanor, could you please see Mrs. Henderson out? Olivia stood up, her dignity in tatters. The tears were real now, but they were tears of defeat, not repentance. You really going to do this? After everything? There is no everything, Olivia, I said, meeting her gaze one last time. There is only a past I have no interest in revisiting, and a future you have no place in. I wish you well, but I never want to see you again. Eleanor entered, professional and impassive. Olivia looked at me, a final, desperate hope fading from her eyes, leaving only a hollow emptiness. She had come for a treasure she believed was hers by right, only to find it was, and always had been, locked away from her forever. Without another word, she turned and walked out of my office, out of my life, for the final time. I didn't watch her go. I turned back to the window. The sun was setting over London, painting the sky in streaks of gold and violet. The city was alive with light and possibility. I thought of the young man with the ink-stained fingers, and I felt a surge of something that was both sorrow and profound gratitude for the journey he had been forced to take. He had been broken, but he had rebuilt himself, piece by piece, into something stronger, truer, and infinitely more valuable. The greedy wife had divorced her husband for a better one, and in doing so, she had given him the greatest gift of all, the desperate, motivating need to become the best version of himself. And that man, the man she threw away, had finally found a wealth far greater than money, the unshakable peace of having survived the storm and built his own harbor.